Welcome to Module 3. Module 3 really builds upon Module 2. It starts with we have two clear areas we're going to look at in this module. The first one is assessment. In Module 2 we talked about data, qualitative and quantitative. Well, assessment is a tool of using data. So we're going to look at the assessment, define it, and look at what is its function, how I can use it in the classroom, not only to just see where students are, but also give them feedback, the active form of assessment. So let's flip to the web page and have a look at that. You see that assessment there is defined, and particularly looking at formative and summative assessment, but we're introducing this concept of for, as, and of learning. Now in differentiation, we're not so much looking at the assessment at the end of the cycle of learning, but we're more so how can we use assessment for learning, and there's some extra bits about how can assessment be as learning, like a project or an inquiry process. So information on assessment and how you could then use it in your classroom. This video talks about assessment along the way, the concept of continuous assessment and feedback for students. And underneath that, we've outlined a few different strategies and some tips and tricks and tools that you might use for assessment, whether at the beginning for pre-assessment, continuous feedback along the way, or summative assessment at the end. So the first part of what we're looking at is that assessment and its importance to inform your practice as you go. The second part talks about learner needs. Now, every learner has a different profile in terms of their understanding, in terms of their preferences, and how they assimilate information. We talked about that earlier. This unit talks particularly about those who have specific learning needs. As a teacher, you'll have students who have those special requirements. They're diagnosed learning needs. So we're going to look globally at disability and what are the codes in the teaching standards? What are the legislations that are applicable? This concept of reasonable adjustment. And then we'll dive into more common learning needs that require particular interventions. So let's have a look at what's on our page. So learning needs, we're going to look at that concept of how can you, in culture, in your classroom, not just for your learning needs student, but everyone, that growth mindset. I don't understand it yet. How can I persevere and overcome? But then we'll be talking about autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Now, I constructed these learning needs, particularly saying, well, what's the definition, and what are the teaching strategies that I might like to use in my classroom with additional resources. So ASD, ADHD, different, but there's some overlap, and what's that look like, and what's my application, and auditory processing. How does that affect learning, and what might I do as a teacher, how to adjust my plan to meet the needs of those individual students with particular learning needs. So to recap, we're looking at assessment and data across the range of the teaching cycle, and then we're going to dive into particular specific diagnosed learning needs and how you might adjust your teaching to cater for those. So welcome to Module 3.